If you're a regular listener of the Hammer Factor, you'll know that we poke fun at Whitewater SUP, endlessly discuss the merits of paddle offset, and constantly rip on each other while making outlandish claims about a wide range of topics. This show has a bit of a different tone as we discuss Whitewater and the risks associated with it. We just recently lost Maria Noakes to the river, who touched many, many, many lives, as well as others recently. This is a hard topic to dive into, and one that we really feel we needed to discuss. Not so much that we had answers to things that were happening, but it is a fabric of Whitewater, and this show pretty much is woven within that fabric. Towards the end, you'll notice we reference a letter from Marc Hunt. Marc Hunt and Cat Potts, both very experienced whitewater paddlers going back to the 70s, had two sons, Colin and Taylor. Both grew up around Whitewater, first as young children living in the NOC community and later on various rivers around the South. They both were students in the paddling program at Camp Mondamin for multiple years. Both went on to become expert boaters, whitewater instructors, guides, annual Green River racers, and paddled Class 5 whitewater on various rivers. Taylor died tragically in December 2015 on the Class 5 Rio Sardinas Grandes in Ecuador. The incident was a flush plus strainer situation, which began with Taylor losing his paddle in a snag, then with other challenges compounding in a series of cascading unlucky events. Hand rolling, rescuer almost got to him before the rescuer's skirt, imploded in a hole. While many of us would love to have the opportunity to reshape the events of that tragic day, Marc and Kat do little second guessing of themselves when it comes to introducing their kids to whitewater. Yes, they'd love to have their son back, but they also have had a great life in a community of paddlers, enjoying rivers together as a family. They are very glad for the ways they emphasize safety and help their boys prepare for the river. Colin, Kat, and Marc still paddle whitewater actively. There are many risks out there, and parents struggle with what to expose their kids to or not to. High school football, driving at the age of 16, mountain biking, tough choices. As one step in advocating safety with his boys, Marc provided the letter that I'm about to read to both of them 4 years apart, as each was beginning to run the Green River Narrows at age 19. This is a letter from Marc before we get into the show. Dear Colin, and later Taylor, I'm really happy you have found such a love for rivers and paddling, both professionally and for fun. As you might guess, even before your mom and I had kids, I was hoping that they'd grow up to enjoy outdoor adventure and especially paddling. It's great to enjoy this stuff together with you and to know you are pursuing it yourself. I just wanted to write now to inject a comment about risks, though. We care about your safety and your being around for a few years, but we know you are plenty old and mature to be making your own decisions, so we don't want to preach too much. There is a point in risk sports, whether it's extreme paddling, mountaineering, extreme skiing, whatever, that skills and experience become less of a factor and random chance becomes a greater factor. On whitewater, that starts kicking in significantly at Class 5, especially on sections that are not frequently run and for which the moves are not well known, like on the green, though there's still plenty of risk on the green. You have heard us mention the names of all the people we knew too well who drowned on Class 5 whitewater. Robin Dodd, who worked for me at Sunburst, and I helped teach to paddle. He drowned in the presence of Mark Lyle in New Zealand, pinned in an invisible sieve in a drop. Pablo Perez, fellow NOC guide and instructor who drowned on the Rocky Broad, pinned under a log in a drop that had not been there days earlier. Rich Weiss, world-class slalom racer, who died backwashing in a hole at the base of a drop while training for a sprint race the following week. This was a drop that others were running routinely. Doug Gordon, former fellow NOC guide and longtime slalom racer, in a flush drowning on an expedition in China. John Dolbear, NOC staffer on the Lower Meadow in West Virginia. There are plenty of stories of other people we might not have known. The point here is that these folks were all expert boaters with years of experience on this type of water, and it was not their skill or a big mistake that let them down. It was much more the misfortune of the moment and had everything to do with the level of difficulty of the stuff they were running. I backed away from hardcore stuff years back for a couple of reasons, and I'm sure you've noticed that I'm pretty indifferent about going to the green. One was that the adrenaline flow manifested more and more towards anxiety than joy. I suspect I am genetically wired for that somehow alongside my acrophobia. But also, I just came to feel that because of a predictable frequency of bad things happening in Class 5, it might just be a matter of time before I would get bit, no matter how good my skills or how carefully I scouted prepared. When someone drowns in these sorts of situations or is seriously injured, like Slim Ray or Lincoln Williams, two other close friends, it is generally said, he knew the risk and decided to take them on. I think that is true to an extent at least, but I cannot help but thinking that enthusiasm and emotion get in the way of objective evaluation of risk. Gosh knows that the adrenaline rush that comes with this stuff can be darn irresistible. Peer pressure from friends often fits in somewhere. Being able to say, I did it to others, especially when the route has been run by others before, can be important from an ego standpoint. The notion that one can be a professional, in quotes, and earn some sort of responsible living doing this are elusive for all but very few. And a video camera being there adds a lot of pressure as well. I also think that folks that are newer to creeking and Class 5 can assume that risk because so many others do this stuff, it must be a manageable risk. So I'm writing hoping you'll consider two things. First, that you'll really try to get past the emotion and peer pressure when you are considering what to run or not, and evaluate risks and hazards as objectively as possible. What others have done before, or what others in your group are choosing to do that day, should be discounted in that calculation. The brethren of Class 5 boaters has a high frequency of folks that are genetically blind to risk. Second, that you from a distance consider just how far up this risk spectrum you really want to take yourself in the sport. I know that your mom has concerns like this, and she talked with you in the past and might chime in here some more as well. And I hate to be preachy towards you and promise not to do it very often. You're doing so great in defining your life and making good choices these days. As you can tell, though, I think a lot is at stake here, and I would not be comfortable going forward in my life without expressing all this to you. Plus, I'm counting on you to be there to pull me out of Crystal when I'm in the canyon celebrating my 70th birthday in a kayak. You do not owe me any specific response at all, though please email me back and let me know you received it. My only goal is that you have a chance to consider all of this. Please save and read this email another time or two over the coming days before you delete it. Love, Papa. That is some powerful stuff on a powerful topic that it's hard to find an answer for. Thank you so much for that, Mark, and Kat, and Colin, you're the man, and here we go. We'll get into the hammer factor.
You're listening to Grace, Geltman, and Weld on the Hammer Factor. Take it away, boys.
Okay, welcome to Hammer Factor, episode 44. My name is John Grace. I am your host, and I'm joined by former North Fork champion and Outdoor Alliance Policy Director Louis Geltman, as well as Whitewater legend and co-owner of Immersion Research, John Weld. Welcome back for another show, boys.
What up, Ball? I say that with all due respect.
Well, we got a good show lined up today. We've got some great viewer mail. Lewis is fully prepared. I even hear he has notes scribbled down. So
don't set the bar too high for me.
Value bombs galore coming in there. Great listener mail. All kinds of responses to our talk about guns and politics and purchasing decisions and boycotts and everything from last show.
I really thought we were going to get some hate mail about that. Seems like we didn't.
I think I mostly got the hate mail because
Did you just filter it out for us?
no, I gave it to you as it came. But anyway, we got some good listener mail as always, and of course we are going to drop into a tough topic today on risks and whitewater and accidents that happened. And this weekend I went to a life celebration for Maria Noakes, who passed away on the 3rd of March on the Cheoah River. It was pretty incredible, the number of people. There were probably 700 people there. There were great speeches from Mateo, her oldest son, that was really good, and Frank, and Tom Kimmel had a great song that he wrote within like 10 minutes of getting ready for it. And anyway, we'll get into that in a little bit, but something we're going to bring to the show today is risk in whitewater that we have not really talked about, so we will certainly get into that. Before we move on, or actually, as we move on, let's get into our Lewis Geltman segment here. And Lewis, we have a couple of headlines here to talk about and some various things to touch on, but I want to just throw this over to you and see what's going on in Outdoor Alliance world.
Dude, before we go too far with that, I have a really exciting piece of information to share regarding our ongoing public health campaign to eradicate low offset paddles.
Okay.
Excellent.
Okay.
I feel like an objection that's often raised to our recommendations is with regard to play boating. And I'm very excited to share that friend of Hammer Factor, Benny Marr, is acquiring a 65-degree offset paddle and getting on the program.
And what tipped him over the edge?
Used mine.
What? There you go.
There you go.
I think he'd borrowed a paddle from Dawson when they were over at the Indus. It was like a 55. Thought it was pretty good, but
Wasn't quite enough, was it?
Room to improve.
Right.
You'd might as well just go 10 degrees better.
I've been teaching rolling here at the local pool on Thursday evenings, and been dealing with people learning to roll with a low offset paddle. As beginners, they've been coaxed into getting these almost flat paddles, and the problem is they don't have a control hand, right? They grip the paddle equally. They sort of, make up. They sort of grip the paddle somewhere in between a control hand on both sides.
Okay.
And what happens when they go to set up to roll is the blade is at a really cockeyed angle, right? So they flip over, and what happens is their blade takes this like very much of a plowing type angle as they sweep out across the water, begin to roll, and they start to apply pressure on it. It knifes right to the bottom of the pool. And that's because they have completely failed to have a control hand in their right hand. And they have no idea of the relationship between their blade and their hand.
I mean, how do you what do you do? Do you tell them, look, I'll teach you this one time, but you got to get a different paddle, or how are you?
The crazy thing is that for a lot of these people, and some of these people have been paddling for a year, on rivers and paddling a lot. And I say, you have to have a control hand. They look at me like they've never heard. This is completely new news. They've never heard of such a thing as a control hand. And I show them when they set up that there's a relationship between that index and their paddle shaft and the relationship with the blade on the water, and that's really important to getting a good roll, So that's a new thing too. I've taught rolling for a long time, and that is a relatively new problem where people just have no idea what a control hand is.
Huh.
Yeah. It just keeps getting worse and worse. I mean, I feel like we're just at the tip of the iceberg of problems of we're going to see problems 10, 15 years down the road, health problems associated with low offset paddles. That's going to put crushing weight on our healthcare system in this country.
I think we're really making a difference, though.
Every little bit helps. This Benny Marr thing is huge.
Yeah, I think it's big news.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, I agree with that. We'll have to get his response, and we'll have to track his progress as a paddler from here on out.
I think he's going places.
I think we're going to see some great things out of this guy.
I do too.
All right, where are we at? Outdoor Alliance.
Oh man, I saw that our buddy Ryan Zinke is on the Hill today, testifying in front of the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee about their fiscal 19 budget, and old Zinke got taken to the woodshed a bit. I was hoping to watch it this morning, but I went kayaking instead. But I was just cruising or perusing E&E, and I saw this quote from Oregon Senator Ron Wyden. He said that supporting Zinke's confirmation was, quote, "as of today, one of my biggest regrets of my time in public service." I thought that was pretty noteworthy.
You and him share that same opinion, eh?
Yeah, our man Ron Wyden, he's a friend.
I don't know if you brought this up, but was there any talk about his new door? What's up with his $150,000 door?
It sounds like he did get taken to the woodshed a bit for all of his various seemingly luxurious expenditures. I actually saw like another article about the door thing, and of all the things that I'm riled up at Ryan Zinke about, I'm not sure that makes the list, especially. I mean, I don't think that it was him asking for something luxurious. I think it was them trying to fix a leaky door in a historic building and, government contracting and all the rest of it. So that doesn't really, I don't know.
When's Zinke going to get fired? That's my question.
I don't know, man. It seems like he's not being overly critical of Russia or, I think just sort of garden variety corruption is pretty much par for the course. I think it's hard to go too far with that in this administration. You have to really.
So he's avoiding the big landmines, is what you're saying.
I mean, seemingly. I mean, I think that just being a big cheerleader for the oil and gas industry and sticking it to public landowners in favor of industry. I mean, that's kind of what this administration is about. That's not him going off in left field. That's doing what he's been put there to do.
He could be looking at a promotion.
I think that what Ryan Zinke wants is to run for governor of Montana. And I think that's why you're seeing, like, he's, talked about I think a new national monument in Montana, because he recognizes that these things are popular. And so he wants to, do right by people in Montana, because that's where he sees his political future being made. And he recognizes that, conservation is popular and that he can, do some things in a place where he sees his political future. At the same time, stick it to everyone else in the rest of the country in favor of these, deep-pocketed industries who will also support him in his political future and, wherever it might be. So I think that's what Zinke's endgame is, honestly.
Is there a term for this in politics, like earning your favors now? Or, he's stacking the deck? What's he doing? What do you call that?
I don't know. There probably is some turn of phrase that's slipping my Civ-like brain.
I'm thinking of a few phrases that would certainly get me in trouble with Kara. So I'm just going to bring my thoughts.
But this week it sounds like Congress is also kind of hammering out the details of appropriations for the rest of 2018. So that's spending. And there's a couple of policy pieces that are kind of part of that conversation that it would be timely to write your members of Congress about this week. One of them is Lisa Murkowski, senator from Alaska, is pushing for this provision to eliminate the applicability of the roadless rule to the Tongass National Forest in Alaska. The roadless rule protects about 30% of national forests and basically bars new road construction in places where there aren't already roads or places that are inventoried roadless. And that goes a long way to protecting these places from energy development and from timber development. And if the Tongass were to be exempted through this rider to the appropriations, that would sort of open the door for the attacks on the roadless rule across the rest of the country. And the roadless rule does a really good job of protecting places that are really important for outdoor recreation, because it's it helps keep these places in a relatively pristine state, but it still allows us to do all the things we want to do, like go mountain biking, for example. So if you have a minute, go check out outdooralliance.org. We got a blog post up about this. I think our newsletter's going out tomorrow that'll have maybe a link to write your reps on roadless stuff. And then the other thing that's kind of a part of the conversation, I think, is this is something that would be positive, and I think it's probably I'm not holding my breath, but I think there's a chance that there would be a fire funding fix. I think we've talked about this on here before, but fire suppression now accounts for more than 50% of the Forest Service's budget, and it, drastically affects the agency's ability to do the rest of its, fulfill the rest of its responsibilities, whether it's planning or, building and maintaining trail or, all the things that we care about. That money gets taken to fight fires. And it's like a budgetary issue. That money gets spent no matter what. And there's I don't want to get too deep into the weeds, but there's a really important budgetary fix to the way we pay for fire funding that needs to happen that would help make it more like the way we pay for other natural disasters like, hurricanes and things like that. And there's a chance that may make it into this appropriations bill. And again, we have some information up on outdooralliance.org. Make it really easy for you to write your member of Congress and try and move the needle on this. And, fingers crossed.
Who would argue against this? It seems like it's kind of, I can't imagine someone who has an interest in having firefighting money come from somewhere else besides.
There's been really strong bipartisan agreement in the West, especially in the Senate, about fixing this. There's been some attempts by Republicans to sort of hold this fix kind of hostage for some forest management reforms, basically things to streamline environmental decision-making around logging projects. So I think they are hoping that they can sort of trade off this necessity against some problematic forestry stuff. I think that there's some level of reform around decision-making on forestry projects that has, relatively broad bipartisan support. But whether that sort of middle ground position is able to prevail is a little up in the air. And then on the other side, what I've heard previously was that, Paul Ryan's alleged fiscal rectitude demanded that he not support this because, at least on paper, it sort of looks like new spending. And I don't know, for what it's worth, I'd heard that he has been sort of a roadblock to getting us across the finish line in the House. But maybe now that he's abandoned all pretense at fiscal responsibility with the tax bill, maybe he's ready to.
Where did he finally stand on the tax bill? I mean, he didn't vote for it, right?
Paul Ryan?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, of course he did.
Yeah, dude, he loved it.
Yeah.
No, I'm thinking of Rand Paul.
Yeah, Rand Paul may not have.
Yeah.
Rand Paul, I mean, for most of these guys, I think that this, it's like, it's not about deficits. It's like they just want to cut spending. And then if you cut taxes, then it becomes an excuse to cut more spending because you're like, oh, now we have this huge deficit because we just gave $1 trillion tax break to billionaires. So now we have to, cut social welfare programs. And that's the real end game. It's just destroying the ability of government to function.
Go to outdooralliance.org and get on the email list. These come directly from Lewis, which is always cool.
That's the VIP list. I don't know if.
Do we not talk about that on the Hammer Factor?
We can talk about it another time.
Anyway, go to outdooralliance.org and get on the spam list.
The low budget.
No, our communication stuff is really outstanding and it's really accessible. We have this smaller group of mainly outdoor industry folks who we feel like are interested in getting some nerdier, more in-depth, less polished communication stuff, or just sort of a little more inside baseball. And I added you guys to the list. I thought you'd be into it.
Oh, I am into it. I love these.
Well,
we're already over our intro time, but I will say that was good, Lewis.
Well, thank you, Lewis, for that.
Well, thank you for putting up with putting up with that.
So not to change the subject here, but you went kayaking.
I did. Man, I've been crushing middles for a few weeks now. I made my glorious return to the Little White this weekend. It was all I dreamed it would be. I feel like my world view is drastically improved.
And I got my obligatory free gear request from Lewis immediately following his run down the white, Little White.
Well,
Shopping
welcome
list
back.
of several $1,000s worth of custom kayaking gear.
I can't decide if it's better to let it trickle in a little at a time or just to hit.
Just roll in open kimono, man. Just let it all hang out.
Should we get into a little viewer mail? I'm gonna read through these and throw them off to you guys, and I'll let you comment on them. First one comes in from Rainier Kinney. He says, "I love the podcast, love the banner, love how you shit on everything, even stuff I really like."
I'm going to start being more positive.
He has a quite a long email here. He kind of refutes my opinion on it's a knee-jerk reaction to make these boycott decisions on purchasing or not entering into agreements with certain organizations that align politically with one way or the other. Basically says the government is acting too slow. It's an opportunity for business to kind of pick up the game. And he hopes that sales aren't necessarily the reason to enact these boycotts or to decide you're going to make a decision like selling guns to people over a certain age, that he hopes it's a moral thing. Finally, he wants some gear sponsorship from John Weld. So let me throw.
Right. That's kind of the summation of the email.
So let me throw this over to you guys. Did you read the email, and what are your opinions on this one?
Do you guys still eat meat?
This discussion we had this very impromptu, sort of like unexpected conversation about this last show, and it sparked probably some of the most passionate emails we've gotten to date. I had no idea it would resonate like this. I don't know. I don't have an answer to this. I mean, I don't know. Gelman, you go. What do you think? Let me hear what you have to say, and I'll see if that sparks some thoughts on my end.
I don't know. I mean, I guess I just feel like it's like I'm not trying to like organize a huge boycott or anything like that. But all things being equal, if I can spend money, and if when I spend money, some of it's going towards supporting causes I care about versus supporting causes I'm, virulently opposed to, it's not a hard call for me, Right. I don't know. I don't want my money going to the NRA. I mean, I'm not saying if Camelback was the only game in town, I wouldn't buy Camelback anyway, but they're not, and I'm not going to.
Well said. Well, that moves me into the Vista brands. Is it Vista or Vista brands? Can anybody correct me on that one?
I'd say it's Vista.
Okay.
Vista sounds like you're from down south somewhere.
On a related note, do you guys still eat meat?
Oh boy,
not very much. Why?
Oh, I just saw last week that the Farm Bureau was petitioning to intervene in the lawsuits over the Bears Ears and Grand Staircase Escalante reductions because they feel like they want to make sure that they're in favor of the monument reductions because it facilitates access for grazing.
So we're boycotting meat, or are we in favor of meat?
I'm boycotting meat. I've been off.
We're boycotting meat.
I've been off meat for a long time, but it was just one more reminder that, like when you're eating beef, like that's what you're supporting is, these anti-environment.
Yeah, it's getting hard to shop, right? I mean, Jesus, you go to Target now and you have to check like every single company in there and what they've invested in and who they're working with, and
this is turning into Portlandia here, huh?
Right? That's kind of what I'm getting at. Where do you draw the line?
Well, hang on.
You've been off meat for ages, though, haven't you?
Me?
Well, yeah.
No.
Well, before we continue with this, let me go into another one that's on the same vein here. This comes from Tom Sherburne.
Oh God.
So Tom says, he has a lot of the same opinions, and I don't want to read the whole. These are great emails from everybody who sent one on, and don't take it as a slight that I don't read your entire email. It's just that I want to get to as many as possible in the time that we have. But I'll summarize. He says, kind of like
first of all, Sherburne runs shred ready helmets.
Or does he still do that, or do you do that?
He's in cooperation with the gang out at CKS.
Well, those guys owe me some money for the T-Dub helmet, so I'll get with them later. That's another discussion.
You should. I think you should.
But anyway, Tom.
CKS owns Shred Red,
No, they have some kind of distributing partnership going on of some sort.
So anyway, Tom Sherburne, he basically says the same thing. It's not political; it's moral. He and this is more along the veins of a bigger company owning several brands. And basically, what the brands are saying, like Bell and some of the others, is that hey, we operate independently, and Tom is kind of, poo-pooing on all of their ideas, saying, hey, look, you know who you sold to when you got bought. He doesn't see separation, and he doesn't buy the standalone model of one brand operating under an umbrella. Kind of calls me out a little bit on the whole knee-jerk thing as well. I think I kind of upset some people on that one. His daughter goes to App State, and he loves boon kayaking, even though she's not a paddler. And finally, he says that Weld looks like Don Jr. with messy hair.
No. The way have you noticed that Don Jr. looks like Weld with Moose?
Yeah.
Is that how he ends the email? Have you noticed that Sherburne, if he had like a bowler hat and a cigar, he'd look like those dogs playing poker?
It's it's tough for Sherburne to talk about anybody's hair, but there's these kind of have the same point, is that justifying this kind of purchasing decision based on politics. Would you not agree with that? And these two liken it to morals. It's a moral decision, not a political decision.
But that's the thing is, I feel like this is becoming one of my pet peeves, is people deriding legitimate policy discussions as playing politics with an issue. It's as soon as there's a mass shooting, people are like, oh, we can't politicize these people's deaths. It's you're not, it's a cop out, It's politics is how we discuss the big issues facing our society. And it shouldn't be like a dirty word, I don't know. It's I think you're both right. It's politics, but politics are the outlet for our moral sentiments in a way, right? It's this is how we're engaged in collective decision making, and these are important decisions that reflect our values as a community. And
but boy, these values are there's so little gray area left in these values. It is so black and white. It's so one side or the other, and it's so passionate.
Yeah.
Right. If you buy a helmet now, you're basically evil, from a certain company. Right. That's strong stuff,
And I don't want to be I support gun reform. I'm not saying don't, when I say this knee-jerk reaction, but that's in the Bill of Rights. It's right up there with religion and having a jury, and all of a sudden, are you going to start not buying certain things because of people's faiths? And where does this end? To me, Lewis, you're a policy guy, and I don't know what year it was, 1993 or 1995, somewhere in there, the CDC released a report saying, hey, it's way more dangerous to have a gun in your home than it is to have one in your home to protect you. And the NRA kind of poo-pooed the CDC is studying gun control deaths. Here we are, some 20-something years later, 600,000, gun injuries in the country since then. It seems to me like a better decision would be for, okay, let's get together and at least get the CDC to start studying this so we can have an informed decision. I don't know where that slippery slope ends of every time there's something happening and the winds blow a certain direction, you have to change within your company or change within a consumer.
Yeah, I agree. It's not optimal. That's for sure. But
it's no longer fair to say, I like this helmet. They did great customer service. It fits well. It was the right price range. And now it's what does this company stand for? When they got sold, why did they sell to this company? Did they need the money? Were they short on cash? Were they greedy? What was the reason for it? Would they be in business if they didn't sell? I have to do, a lot of research now on these products to make sure that fits my
Yeah.
my very narrow criteria. I'm not. Yeah, it's to be honest. I mean, I'd probably be not inclined to support companies, that go against my political beliefs. And I'll give you an example. At IR, we used a company called Uline for all of our packaging until we found out that the people that run Uline are probably racist. I don't know. I mean, they're pretty aggressive in the immigration front. I can say that safely. And, everything that goes along with it. And we stopped using them. We went to another company. So.
Are we going to get sued after this, Weld?
Sure. Bring it. They can have it.
I don't really know what the answer is, but for me personally, it seems knee-jerk. But I also understand other people's equating it to morals and whatnot. But I do know that a company that I work with quite closely is Duke Energy, and they have a hydrology department. Incredible people, great people, good to work with. And then they have other departments that, I mean, there was a study that just found the cancer-causing agents coming out of the what do they call the ash ponds, the coal ash ponds, and filtering into the water around Asheville are 38 times higher than the EPA announces. And Duke is saying that those studies are premature and this and that and the other. So,
are they involved with any energy extraction?
I'm sure at some level.
Well, that's a non-starter.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm going to quit using electricity until I find another power. I don't know. It's tough for me the people I work closely with to brand them as the same people at another part of a giant conglomerate like that. So I kind of feel for the guys at Bell Helmets. I guess that's my
Yeah, and I mean, you do feel for there's people at those companies who are, trying to do the right thing, like at Duke Energy. I think that they've taken some pretty progressive positions on, like climate and, I don't want to characterize any of these entities as like monolithic in their views, but I don't know. I mean, just for me as somebody buying stuff, it's like the amount of my money that I want going to the National Rifle Association is fucking zero. I'm not. It's like that kind of settles it for me.
All right. Well, we will end that topic on this discussion.
Yeah, I think we need to move on.
All right, let's jump into something a little more lighthearted here. This comes at us from Mike Harvey. Basically, Mike, co-owner of Bad Fish Sup, has some really good points in here. Really like the Ashley Nee interview, which a lot of people said they really liked the Ashley Nee. So if you didn't check that out, go to the last episode 43 and listen to her interview. That was pretty awesome. Basically, he talks about how hard it is to find a slalom boat, how hard it is to get into that, the barriers that you have to break through to get into that, how there's no plastic boats on the market. Downriver racing, which is something that Mike is into, is even in worse condition. But out of nowhere, he found this Chinese-style race that they do on the numbers. And if you don't know what that is, everybody gets out of their boat, they run, get in their boat, mass start, everybody just scrambles down the river. Whoever wins, then they have beers, whatever, and celebrate after. And he's got like 15 to 20 boats every Tuesday night, and he's stoked about that. So it got him thinking, as far as slalom and revitalizing slalom, could there be some kind of connection between these boats like the Braps and Rippers and that kind of thing, and starting those kind of boats and organizing races and events that cater to those boats? And I believe we called this the populist slalom racing. I think there's some merit to that. What do you guys think?
I mean, I think it's a great idea, and I would love to see some more races like that. I will say that, the premise that plastic boat downriver racing has revitalized traditional downriver racing seems to be without a lot of merit. I mean, wildwater racing in the U.S. is as
vibrant as ever.
Yeah. I mean, it's like crickets, So like, I'm not sure that I see that has successfully crossed over to revitalizing whitewater racing, but I would love to see some more plastic boat slalom races. And I think the key is to just to do it on, relatively fun whitewater. It's like right now, most of the grassroots slalom races are on like class 1, the Penn Cup series is great. There's like Pacific Northwest Cup races out here, and they're all on like, class 1, 2. And people who aren't coming from a slalom background, who are river runners, like they're just not that stoked on it, And if you had some races meant for plastic boats on, class 3, 4, class 4, I think you'd get a really nice turnout for those. And I think people would be stoked, and it'd be a really fun thing to do. And I'd love to see that happen. I'd love to help make it happen. I think that the obstacle always has been and always will be with slalom, that just logistically putting on a slalom race is a pain in the ass. It's like you got to hang gates, you got to have gate, you got to have organization, and it's just like it is just way more logistically daunting than putting on a downriver race, and that's always going to be the problem.
100%.
Yeah, IR's very own Ian Van Stoutmeister put on a pretty successful race series this summer in the Lower Yacht, and it involved some natural slalom courses. But I have to be honest, man, when you sit in like a 19-pound slalom boat, full-length composite slalom boat, and even just on easy water and start doing gates, it's pretty electric. You know what I mean? In terms of performance of the boat, and in terms of like how hard it is if you've never done it before, but at the same time, if you have some kind of boating skills under your belt, you feel the potential of awesomeness. You know what I mean? And you really start to think about what's going on in the current with those big, light, fast boats, and that's where it becomes addictive. At least that's been my take on it, So I think there's some merit to what he's saying, but at the end of the day, I mean, you're never going to experience the awesomeness of slalom until you get in a slalom boat at the end of the day,
Well,
that's true, man. I jumped back in my slalom boat for the first time in a while last time I was in DC, and like, man, it is so sick. It's like if you've never paddled a slalom boat, it's like, it's faster than a green boat and spins faster than your tuna. And like you can do pivots better than you can in any of these modern pivotty boats. It's like a boat that just
when you start doing gates, in it, I don't care how good you are. If you've never done it before, even if you're on the easiest whitewater, you feel like a complete amateur. But at the same time, I think you do feel like you're the tip of learning a whole new language of kayaking, Yeah, because you never knew existed before that.
But you can't say But I really like what he's saying in the fact that not everybody can just jump right into NASCAR. My
concern would be is that I think it's a great idea, but my concern would be is that it's not going to have the hook. You know what I mean? You're not going to hook. It's going to be hard to hook people with that.
Man,
it's not super hard to plod down through a gate course in a BRAP. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I don't know, man. I think there's some serious
and it's equally as rewarding.
Yeah. I think there's merit to it. Number one, you can do these slalom races in those type of boats. Number two, you can take them to the Golly or the Green or the Little White or whatnot, and you can have fun with them on class 3. So I don't know, man. I think it's a good introductory step. I don't think he's saying that this has to be the end all be all. I just think it's a good way to light a little spark.
All right. Well, Badfish Mike. There we go. Thank you.
Thanks, Don Jr.
Keep it up, Geltman.
Donnie Jr. That's not leaving.
We'll get a nickname for both of you guys going too. That's my strong point.
This one goes out to Donnie Jr. No, this doesn't go to Donnie Jr. This goes to Lewis. Lewis, I normally enjoy your informed perspectives. This comes from Daniel Gertie. Hat tip to Daniel here. I normally enjoy your informed perspectives when it comes to outdoor policies, but I cannot stand by after listening to the last episode. Stop spreading.
He's so right on this.
He is, and we've been on to him the whole time, Weld. But stop spread. He says, stop spreading the falsehoods about DC. There's absolutely a Hooters in DC. It's in Chinatown on 7th Street between H and I Street. Great news for your future Outdoor Alliance meetings. You're welcome, Dan Gertie.
I stand corrected. I don't know how that's going to go over with the rest of the crew, but if anybody wants any wings, I'll be sure to know where to direct them, I guess.
You know how you text me those pictures of like Mitch McConnell like walking through the halls and stuff? You're going to have to text me like selfie of you of the boys at Hooters.
I'd personally boycott Outdoor Alliance if they met at Hooters.
Here's a great one from Purvis Major on our Daniel topic. Purvis Major sends this to us about Daniel De Laverne and Raymond Cotton staying at their historic church. They paddled hard for 6 weeks. One day they were just gone, and Purvis says all of a sudden LVM started showing up in my mail every day. But what I want to lead this into is I got a phone call from none other than Nate Helms. And Nate essentially called out Weld on referencing an article on Site Z that maybe necessarily wasn't that flattering towards Daniel. And Nate wrote a really good article on Daniel at Site Z. I think it was called "The Daniel Effect." What say you, Mr. Weld? Mr. Helms was not happy when he called me.
No, he's right. The answer's simple. I like Andre and I don't like Nate. So I was obviously more interested in promoting Andre's story. No, Nate knows that's not true. And he's absolutely right. I completely spaced on that. He did write a great piece on Daniel. And I have another question for you. Do you have a child named after Daniel, one of your many children?
I have the middle name of my youngest child is Wright, which is Daniel's middle name.
And we have Hillicky has a kid named after Daniel, right? Mm-hmm. And then my youngest kid's middle name is Daniel. That's something else, right?
So, yeah, I think when you're naming your kids after somebody, they've definitely had some influence.
Anyway, go to Site Z. If you haven't already, go check it out. It's actually really, really cool. It's there's some great stories in there. And if I haven't mentioned it before, there's a story on there by Louis Geltman, which was read something, I'm not kidding, like 40,000 times for the last time I looked, which has been a while. It swept the paddling world by storm, and it's about style, and it's a great article. I think I mentioned this before, but I'm saying it again because it's that good. Sitez.com.
I would, yeah, there's a lot on there that I would commend more highly than that thing I wrote, honestly.
The most popular article on that site, though.
If you want to start with, I also would say everyone should read the Jamie McEwen trilogy. The middle one in there is probably the best thing I've ever read about kayaking ever, about that early descent of the Chattooga. And I actually just sent my mom the other day, Weld, your article about manufacturing in Asia, which I think is also really fascinating. It's something that we've returned to many times on the podcast. And if you haven't read that before, you should check it out.
Here's one from Brian Castillo. Brian says, recent listener, first-time subscriber, smashing job with the podcast. Really keeps me sane amongst the copious hours of admin work in my current world. Is looking for some SUP reviews, which I'll get on that. I'm getting ready to start my SUP series, so we're going to get into we're gonna get into some SUP. Don't you worry. Yeah. All right. Has some great information, but he dug up this video. He was talking about the Theo Berman interview, which he said he really liked from a few episodes back. But he brings up this video. And he wants to know who Dimitri is in this video that Shane made about the Stinger from ages ago. So I think, did you track this down, John?
I did. I take pride in the fact that people write Hammer Factor with the questions they cannot get answers to anywhere else. And this is another great example of that. I wrote Shane, and Shane actually had a really, really boring response to that. He basically said he found this video on YouTube, and it's a guy. I have his name here. We don't know the guy. It's not Theo Berman, although if it was Theo Berman, it'd be awesome. It's DimitriTheLover.com.
DimitriTheLover.com.
There's nothing that I can say that would...
Why was Shane at DimitriTheLover.com?
I think it was like a viral video that he sort of caught wind of, and he just patched in the audio from it.
Okay.
But Shane didn't know the guy. It's not Theo Berman, regrettably. While I was talking with Shane, he actually made a couple points too, which I feel like I should bring up. And I've said this many times, and I've been incorrect about this, as it turns out, that Liquid Logic was never a standalone whitewater boat company. They started with a wreck boat. They started with wreck and whitewater both in line at the same time, and they made fishing boats as well. So he also says, I also do think a standalone whitewater company is viable and would follow the way you all talk about it. You'd have to size it right and not get greedy. Think you could even go to the Remcon route, which is exactly what Jeremy's doing with Blackfly, and he's paying the bills and doing it all himself, which is a good point. I still disagree about the Remcon route. I'd have to really see that to believe it. But he does mention Blackfly, which people have mentioned numerous times in emails as a standalone whitewater boat company. Not only that, a standalone whitewater canoe boat company.
Think about that.
And we should probably think about that. We should probably have Jeremy come on here and describe who he's robbing to get the money to put all this together.
Yeah.
You know who we should have on one day to talk about the dubious roots of a whitewater company is Chan Zwanzig.
Oh God, that'd be a trip.
Yeah. I have a really funny story about getting boats from Chan to take him to Mexico, forging the paperwork to get him across the border, selling them all to Mexicans, having $20,000 in cash in a duffel bag, which we owed every penny of it to Chan, and then getting held up at gunpoint by vigilante cops close to the border, and subsequent adventure of that. But that's for another day.
Did you get the money back?
We did, but it was a scene, baby. Let's just put it that way. Anyway, moving along.
Big thanks to Brian for that email. He says,
and Shane does. We really should have Jeremy from Blackfly come on at some point, explain his business model, because it's unique, to say the least. The fact that he's doing so well.
yeah, he's got the Rimcon model and only whitewater, and he's niched down even further into just whitewater canoeing, and he's making it.
Right.
So,
and he's working 40 hours a week as like as a nurse or something. I don't know.
good email, Brian. I hope that answers your question. He says, I'd leave you with a job less, but I'm not Pacific Northwest enough for that. So cheers will have to do. Very good. Moving on down the list here.
I got an email the other day from, God, I wish I remember his name. It was like a high school guy from the Southeast who was giving a presentation to his class and wanted to talk to me about Outdoor Alliance. And his sign off on his email was "Stay yeasted." I really appreciate it.
Who was that?
I gotta look. We gotta give him a shout out. I gotta find his email.
We got another old school boat review from Tim Kennedy. Did you guys check this out?
It's the Phoenix, one of my favorites. I mean, we were big into attaining out here on the yacht, so the Phoenix plays large into that.
It's the Phoenix Cascade, which should not be confused with the Dagger Cascade.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So
that's exactly right. Yeah. You have to. I'm feeling kind of lousy, so I'm kind of out of it today. Yeah. I apologize.
Well, we'll have some pictures and we'll have this full review in the show notes. But it's a fiberglass boat. It's really fast. These are the pros he's got. It's high volume and comfortable. And then he brings it up again. Did I say it was fast? And then basically, all of his cons were the exact same things as his pros. It's fiberglass, it's long, it's fast, and they're hard to find. So
I'm like honored by these emails we get, man. It's like, I don't know. We get great emails.
It's amazing, isn't it? I mean,
that the Stay Yeasted email is from Ethan Bodden.
Thanks, Ethan.
Big shout out to Ethan. This one goes at you, Weld. Weld, you alluded to Tim Kennedy's nickname back in the day. Let's hear it. He's my boy, but won't say it. It must be a good one. Cheers.
I can't do it. And I was telling Grace this before the show. Poor Tim Kennedy had this nickname in Ohio Pile, and he had it for years and years and years. And I swear there were people in that town who had no idea what his real name was. And you'd say, "Hey, there's Tim," and people would be like, "Who?" And they'd say, "Oh, I mean his nickname," and they'd be like, "Oh,
what was it?"
And then I feel like he's gotten past it. He's moved to a different state. It's like he's in a witness relocation program, and I'm not going to do it. I mean, think about all the great boat reviews he's given us. How could I possibly stab him in the back?
No, you're right. Anyway, these are awesome. Check them out in the show notes. This comes from Styles Tates from the Tide Pod Bandits. formerly known as...
I want to say I love the Tide Pod Bandits, by the way. I think this is, and I'm not kidding around. This is a crew that I'm fully behind. However, Styles Tate is a pseudonym. That's not a real person's name.
No, that's his real name.
Yeah, I haven't read the email yet, but I'm going to go ahead and apologize up front. I feel like I was a little bit harsh about the Tide Pod Media Boys in the last podcast.
No.
We had some fun at their expense. I'm sure that they're lovely gentlemen, and I'm sorry for being a dick.
I definitely got some personal messages, but this one comes from Styles. He says, "I'm 20." If you didn't listen to the last show, I'll just summarize that Lewis tore into Dim Boys Media Cartel like nothing I've ever seen, and they came out of the show being the Tide Pod Bandits. So their new name is the Tide Pod Bandits. This comes from one of the Tide Pod Bandits, Styles Tate. He says, "I'm 26. I live on my own, and I have a teaching degree," in reference to living in basements and taking bong rips. Also, worth noting, no one even thought about the dim shit similarity until it got mentioned on the show. Love the show. It's been my kayaking fix this winter while I've been living in Colorado. So,
He's a good sport.
there you go. Lewis, how do you feel?
I'm sorry for being a dick. I'm sure they're really nice.
We can't read Joey Baloney's. Well, I guess we can read Joey Baloney's. We just can't say his
Can't read his name.
Yeah. He has a great email here referencing some decisions that he made as a young man. And he kind of, took the side of Corey in this life jacket thing. Not that he took the side of not wearing a PFD, but he really understood it. He referenced running the green several times, including the center line at Nutcracker with no PFD. His reason was he was looking for it to be like more imperative not to swim. You can also add him to the list of future serial riders. He's teaching his 7 and 9-year-old daughters to kayak about a year ago. I've formed some thoughts around the future of the sport. Hint, it's bright from where I'm sitting, but retailers can do more and boat gear manufacturers can hold sponsored athletes accountable for more beginner engagement. Even if this makes the discussion cut, please don't use my name on the air. So I'm just going to throw this over to Weld. What are you and Ben Stein doing to get more of your athletes engaged with beginners?
Well, let's back up to the PFD thing because this topic of conversation haunted IR for a solid week after the show. And I want you to imagine a parallel universe where maybe, let's say 30 years ago, right, you had a side shoot of kayaking. And let's say it was maybe like river boarding, right? It wasn't kayaking necessarily, but it was almost just like it, And in that aspect of the sport, you were, say, it was like the thing out of Masters of Making, the
Bellyac.
The Bellyacs, right? But you didn't wear a helmet or a life jacket. That was kind of the aesthetic of the sport, right? And so these two sports came of age, starting in the 70s and the 80s and 90s, with parallel lives, right? And part of the aesthetic of doing this bellyaking was to do it without a life jacket, because you were getting one with the water, that was like the thing. And you were like swimming in a pool. It was like swimming in a pool kind of, and it was not part of it. That would be, in my mind, very similar to climbing without a rope. And you'd have a very different outlook on that behavior if that were the case. But culturally, for whatever reason, we've always worn life jackets in kayaking for good reason. And it's very much a no-no not to wear a life jacket. Most people agree with that.
I agree with that. I'm just wondering what you guys are doing to get your athletes involved with beginners.
Oh, God. I can't get my athletes to do anything.
Let's move on here to our to probably the best email that we've ever got at the Hammer Factor. Can we say that?
Right.
Can we honestly say that?
It's Hall of Fame material for sure.
Okay. I'm going to read this whole one, so everybody bear with me. Sometimes I stumble over my words.
This really made me laugh. This was an outstanding email.
Dear Hammer Factor, this comes at us from Dave Rue.
Jonathan Rue.
Yep.
Oh. Dave and John Rue.
Dear Hammer Factor, The Dagger Outburst was discussed during episode 42 as an all-time classic boat. John Weld and Joe Pulliam both reminisced about the fine watercraft, and they both expressed an interest in purchasing one of these boats. At present, both John and Joe are unable to procure an example of this classic boat, despite their status in the whitewater industry. Thanks for recognizing my personal favorite boat and bringing attention to an important supply issue. During the mid-2000s, my brother and I noticed a shortage of Dagger Outbursts available on the open market, which prompted the creation of the Strategic Outburst Reserve, or the SOR. The SOR is designed to operate in a similar manner to the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, which is the largest centralized emergency supply of petroleum on the planet. The SOR, unlike the SPR, operates a network of decentralized outburst storage repositories throughout the United States. A recent inventory indicates that a handful of SOR members are in control of upwards of 20 outbursts in specific whitewater locations nationwide. SOR members are mandated to monitor the marketplace and purchase outbursts when available, regardless of price or condition. We control the pricing and supply of outbursts nationwide.
Full stop. That's its own paragraph.
Yeah,
There is no questioning that fact.
Outburst prices have historically been quite modest, but we expect that prices will rise as the inventory of SOR continues to increase and the total number of outbursts on the planet decreases. Mention of outbursts on your podcast will no doubt result in a price surge, as every new school hack in the Southeast will be scouring Craigslist for the foreseeable future. Love the show, and good luck with your search for an outburst. If by chance you happen to acquire one, it's only because we allowed it to happen. Sincerely, Dave and John Root, co-founders of the SOR.
So true.
Whenever these T-shirts get in, Dave and John, you're getting one sent to you for free. So send me your email, your shipping address, and it's on the way. But that is a well thought out reserve. I mean, they got some good points.
They do. I've always wondered what happened to those boats, and now I know.
Do you think they'll
They're in
ever
the SOR repositories?
like? When do you think they'll actually start not filling the SOR and distributing some outbursts?
Maybe some sort of outburst supply crisis, sort of like the Arab oil embargo in the 70s or whatever.
No, it'll happen when they get married and their wife's like, get this crap out of her garage now. Okay.
We're all weird about some old boat or some old paddle, Valley Mill. You know, it's every fifth show. I mean, it's like, I just love it that there's people out there that are extreme outburst fans and took the time to put that email together. So thank you very much for that. Oh, God. All right. Well, now to the meat of the subject, boys. Risks and whitewater. I don't really know how to kick this off.
Well, hold on. Before we do that, let's make an announcement for next week's show. We've talked a lot about boat numbers, and popularity. Joe Pulliam pointed out boat sales. In his reign in the late 90s and compared to current boat sales. And there's been some discussion about whether whitewater is growing or not. One barometer that came to mind was the Lower Yacht, which is probably the most complete and longest registry of people paddling a river in the country, as far as I know. And as such, a great source of information to really get to the bottom of how popular whitewater kayaking is and has been. So I called my buddy Eric Martin, who runs Wilderness Voyagers Rafting in Ohio Pile. He, of course, had numbers of private boaters, rafters, and guided raft trips, and information going back to 1975, and actually into the 60s for rafting. He sent me the information. It's a bunch of spreadsheets. Very interesting, and he's actually made, it's his job as running a rafting business in that town to analyze this data, and he had a bunch of interesting insights into this. Rather than just read through the numbers now, I think next week we're going to plan to have him come on, right, and go through these numbers.
Yeah, I think we should.
So it's interesting. At first glance, you're just like, oh, I see. You look at the numbers, and you can draw one pretty obvious conclusion about it, but he actually has some very interesting insights about the nature of our sport and how it's evolved over the past few years. So there we go. So coming up.
Look forward to that.
Coming up on the Hammer Factor. Something that we've been kind of tiptoeing around for the past couple shows is the risks associated with whitewater the accidents that do happen. And like I was saying at the start of the show, we had a great life celebration for Maria Noakes, and it was great to see everybody learn about Maria. A lot of things I didn't know, and I've known her for probably 15 years. But one of the things that was discussed, after the whole thing was over, and keep in mind, this is, Maria was worked at the NOC for several years. Her sons went to the French Broad River Academy. And these are organizations that kind of their foundation is based on the river and getting people into the sport. And kind of the topic of discussion is, what is the path forward? How you deal with a situation like this? What do you learn from it? And how do you move forward? And I just want to, I don't exactly know how to start this, but I want to get your guys' comments on risk and our sport, and primarily what I want to get back to is, what is the path forward to minimize it?
Did you talk to Marc?
I have not had a chance to talk to him. Let me look right now.
I think it's safe to say Marc is a paddler from down your way. He has we had a couple kids. One of them drowned recently, Taylor, down in Ecuador. The idea of risk is, obviously there could not be a more important subject for this guy. And he wrote a letter to his kids, a while ago before any of this happened. Obviously, when you get into the sport, you hang around long enough, you hear a lot of people pontificate on this issue. But in this letter, he actually cut through a lot of the BS and made, in my opinion, a couple of really great points for consideration.
I think I know what you're talking about, but when you say cut through the BS, what do you mean? Lewis, are you getting welled there?
God damn it.
No.
You there?
Better.
A little
Am I
bit.
back? Hello?
Yeah, you're back.
Yeah.
You're back. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I can't win. No, you said before I make these points, what you said?
You were saying cut through the BS, and there's some BS on this topic, so I want to make sure we touch on that. Some things that you've alluded to.
To make a long story short, Marc makes the point that, and this is my interpretation of what he said. I think we'd have to get him to clarify this, but there's a tipping point at Class 5. You start running Class 5, you're running into the giant risk. And when you start paddling Class 5, you really should take a second and think about what you're doing. And he also points out that a lot of time in these situations, you're paddling with people who, for whatever reason, are blind to risk. And we all know these people who just do not look at risk the same way that normal people do. It just does not affect them one way whatsoever. And it made me think about something I've always thought about whitewater, is that a weird thing about paddling hard whitewater is you can really screw things up pretty bad and come out unscathed in the end. You know what I mean? And in whitewater, you tend to either, when you really screw up in hard whitewater, you're either fine or you're dead, And it's hard to enter a risk and reward and punishment learning curve with that kind of environment. Because if you look at motocross, even the most risk blind person, after they break their ankle 4 or 5 times, they're going to have at least some Pavlovian response to that ramp, But that seems to be somewhat absent in paddling, And so you get these people who go unscathed, regardless of how many close calls they have for years, And to me, that's one of the trickier things about whitewater, for sure. But I don't know. This is such a third rail conversation, though. You have to be.
Yeah,
it incites a lot of passions in people, for sure.
I think I've been reflecting on this stuff a lot lately as well, and I think that point that you just made, Weld, it's like the difference between a scary experience that you shake off in 5 minutes and dying it's just a lot finer line than a lot of us like to acknowledge that it is. And I think that dynamic of getting away with things, in a way, you're getting positively reinforced all the time for not necessarily very good decision making. It's like, if you make kind of a bad decision and you get away with it that's just one more memory in your memory bank of, kind of encouraging you to take that risk the next time. And it's hard to break out of that sometimes, I mean, Grace, I woke up this morning to go paddle, and I just thumbing through my emails, and I read that email from Marc Hunt, and, like, it made me cry, man. Like, I mean, just thinking about how it impacts people's families and, the people who, care about people when they pass. Since the last time we recorded, I just went up to Index a week and a half ago for Sam Grafton's memorial. And, I mean, it's very, you just see how these things affect people. And it's like, I'm not gonna quit kayaking. I don't think any of us are. We've all been around this for a long time. And, I think that we've all sort of made the decisions in our own way that whatever it is that we get out of this, it's worth those risks. But I think that we all, owe it to one another, and we owe it to our families and, everyone we care about, just to, make it as safe as we can, and to make good decisions, and to be there for one another. And, it's hard to, it can be a hard thing to justify sometimes, but, I think that the point we were making before, it's like, or the point that Marc made in his email is, at some point, all you can do is put the odds in your favor as best you can. But to some degree, when you start running, class 5, like, there's an element of rolling the dice a little bit. And I think you want to make that element as small as you possibly can, but I think it would be disingenuous to pretend that it's not there.
I think we tend to try and explain this to a lot of times we talk about this amongst ourselves as like we're trying to justify it to non-paddlers, which is a hard thing to do, I mean, last fall I went to the Gauley, I was on my way to the Gauley with my kids, and on the way down we had to stop at a cross country race, for my kids' middle school. And I mean, I'm surrounded by 200 parents who are clearly I have nothing in common with, I mean, I haven't taken a shower in a week. I certainly haven't changed my clothes in a week. I might as well have a sign around my neck that says, like, I might have chiggers. People are standing about 10 feet away from me at all times. They have LL Bean clothing and their travel mugs, and, they're going to spend their day gardening and then going to Olive Garden whatever, for dinner. And I feel like in a lot of ways we're always trying to explain what we do to this crowd, and then along the same lines, Asheville Citizen Times, after Maria's death, wrote an article saying, is the Cheoah too dangerous? Is it too dangerous of a run? And first of all, I mean, the Asheville Citizen Times, I can only imagine what kind of newspaper that is, but I'm picturing like a 4-page section devoted to like a bongo drum exchange or something. That's another subject. But, I mean, do you guys feel like you have to? I mean, amongst paddlers, if you go out and run Whitewater, run hard Whitewater, we all kind of know the score. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think we don't have to explain this risk thing to somebody outside of paddle sports. It seems like we're always explaining this to people outside of paddle sports.
No, I hear you. I mean, that's one of those things that I don't even really start with, because there's no place to start the conversation. I mean, a lot of people will just look at a moving Class 2 rapid and just think, oh, it'd be death if you floated down that. So it's hard for me to even start that dialogue. But for me personally, I legitimately think about the merits of introducing my kids to Whitewater. I have a 4-year-old and 2 2-year-olds, and I mean, there's like legitimate thoughts. I'm like 50-50 on the fence at this point. If it's like, you know what, let's just spend more time worrying about BMX and doing some other things and a little less time on river trips. I mean, this is like a legitimate thing that's going through my head right now. And at the same time, I'm like, am I just being fake and ingenuine with my family, kind of masking this thing that I'm so into? And is that going to just, I don't know. It strikes up a lot of thinking about the decisions that I am going to make. And I'll tell you, and I'll throw this one over to you, but your decisions get different when you have kids. And I mean, what do you think about that, John? Do you ever regret, I mean, you can't, there's no way I guess there's no way for me to hide Whitewater from my kids or whatever, but do you ever worry that it's a bad thing that you introduced your kids to Whitewater?
No. I mean, they're going to be adults soon, and they're free to do whatever they want to do at that point. I can't. I don't think it's right for me to influence on that decision. I'd love to have someone from. I don't know. I don't know. That's a good question. No, to answer your question, no. No, of course not. I'm happy they're boating, and I'm happy the relationship they have with the outdoors, and what we're doing is completely safe. But I feel like Mark made the point in his letter that I definitely got the feeling like he's like, you're an adult now and you're free to do this,
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the right attitude. When they're not an adult, when they're under 18, I think I have a responsibility to keep my kids safe and to make those decisions for them. Not put them at risk.
Yep.
Yeah, I feel like there's a place. Like there's a place in the sport. Like you can pursue kayaking to a certain level without an inordinate amount of risk. I mean, it's not zero, but I don't think it's not, running class 5 all the time either. And it's like, I think when you're pursuing the sport, at kind of a class 4 level, it's like, I think that it's probably pretty in line with, other outdoor sports or anything else. And I mean, we've all known people who've passed doing other things or just, getting sick and dying young or whatever it might be. And it's, it's life. And I think, like we've all gotten a tremendous amount out of these experiences and these opportunities to see these amazing places that not a lot of people get to see and just sort of experience the world in this unique way. And it's worth it. It's just, it comes to a place like on the real margins of risk taking that I think it's worth some consideration of what place you want to give that in your life,
Along the same lines, I think it's worth considering. I mean, Maria drowned on the Cheoah, which is a class 4 run. I don't think anyone was thinking that she was an overhead running a Cheoah. I mean, she ran gorilla on her 50th birthday, not a few months ago, I mean, I think in this case, she just happened to have a terrible accident that happened to be on the river. I don't think she was taking any kind of extraordinary risks running the Cheoah that day. I mean, I'd put on a par as getting hit by a car or something, basically.
Yeah.
I don't think this was a risk-related accident by any means.
Yeah.
That's my opinion on it.
I agree too. I think this was more of a misfortune of the moment kind of thing.
Right, but then people like the Asheville Citizen Times and other people are like, well, all forms of kayaking are a death trap, but that's just not. You're asking for trouble. And I'd say no. I'd say the 200 people at the track meet who are 40 pounds overweight and have a completely sedentary lifestyle are at far greater risk of dying prematurely than I am.
Mm-hmm. Well, my thought process always comes back to just with my family is just make sure you really ingrain the safety aspect, really ingrain all of the dangers. And it really kind of makes you a little bit more nervous for the people who never had someone who got into kayaking at 19 years old watching videos or something like that, and not someone whose parents kind of taught them and really brought them up around the river. I don't know. I think it's important. One line I want to steal from that letter is it's important to always battle enthusiasm and emotion because they get in the way of objective risk. And I think that is something that all the listeners, because we get so fired up about kayaking, it's so overwhelming, and just like the power of it all can sometimes consume you. And I really don't know how to wrap my head around it. I know we've talked about bringing some people on board and kind of have a real discussion about this, but you can't duck the subject because it's a part of our sport, and I think it's I think it's part of the sport when you start running class 5, for sure. And I think if you start running class 5 carelessly, and really taking it for granted, that's when it really becomes a topic of conversation. I mean, I feel like I've run plenty of class 5 whitewater, but I've never felt
Particularly I was making terrible decisions in a juncture in there.
Let me ask you this: what do you guys feel about and I've been a part of this, as videoing crazy things and putting them out there and not really discussing what all went into getting that shot or to that thing happening. Where do you think video lies in that risk factor?
I think, where does youth lie in this risk factor? People impressed doing something for a camera is such a youthful thing. And shit, man, I look back at what I did when I was 20, between ages of 18 and 22. It's a miracle I made it out alive. It has nothing to do with kayaking. Some really seriously stupid stuff going on in that period of my life, for sure. But if you're doing something being influenced by a camera to the degree where you're putting yourself at risk or to accomplish it, that you're not mature enough to be running that rapid.
I know, but a lot of people.
That doesn't mean it's not done, but
I don't know what the science is on the ages when you can make rational decisions, but I know a lot of people are paddling class 5 long before their brain matures to that level.
47.
47.
That's what I've found.
God, I got several more years.
Yes, you do.
I don't know. I'd love to hear what our viewers think about that, assessing risk, whitewater, that part of the sport, how to tackle it, how to make it better and safer for everyone. I don't have the answers.
I think, but I would also advise our listeners to avoid the genre of writing and talk, which I classify as risk porn, where people start defining themselves by the risks that they see around them, and sort of these very melodramatic statements they make about risk, and you've all seen it. I have one person in mind who's a well-known kayaker who's made a career basically of talking about risk, which in my estimation is an extended humble brag, which is not helpful or interesting or useful. They're just talking about themselves. I think we should be legitimately talking about, when a person decides to run a class 5 rapid, how do we make that safer, or how do we make that the reward of a skillful, thoughtful kayaking career, and not just a impulsive I'm doing this because the camera's here and I'm going to do it so I say I can do it, or I did it once. But you guys, am I off base on that? Am I off base on that statement, do you think, or do you think I'm?
Well, I don't think you're off base, but at the same time, I don't think your kayaking persona and your reasoning for kayaking should just be this constant, I live on the edge so I can thrive and tap into my deeper spiritual meaning of confronting death article. Do you know what I'm saying?
Right.
I think it should be
that's kind of what I'm getting at.
And it's just you guys got to remember too that at the end of the day, nobody fucking cares, right? It's you can be the sickest kayaker in the world, and then by the time you're 45, everybody's forgotten how badass you were 10 years ago or 20 years ago and moved on to whatever's next. It's so fleeting. It's do it because you do it for your own reasons,
Yep. No, I agree. This is something I'm sure that we'll get into in a later episode. I definitely wanted to touch on it. It was very powerful weekend. I've got cold chills talking about it right now, being at Maria Noakes Life Celebration. But before we get into it, a little more fun in our rants and raves, one thing really resonated that Nick Williams, Maria's husband, said in his short little speech was, why be around Whitewater? Why be a part of this community? Why be drawn here? And his response is because Whitewater makes great people. And there is no doubt that Whitewater makes great people.
When you have a funeral with 700 people showing up from all around the world, literally, that says something.
I hope I didn't step on Mark's toes there by sharing that email with you guys, but I just thought it was super powerful and could maybe prepare us a little bit.
Mark, I'm sorry if that made you angry, but it was a really great, it was the most concise and well put thought I've seen on that issue to date.
Yeah.
So.
And it resonated big time with me and with you guys as well. So remember, Whitewater makes great people as we get into our rants and raves. Now let's close down this show. Let's see where we're at on time. We're already... I'm just going to be done with the clock, man. We can't keep on the clock. All All right, now to everybody's favorite part of the show, Rants and Raves. This is where your host go on a little bit of a rant or a little bit of a rave about something that we're all fired up about or something that we're ready just to straight poo-poo. And who would like to start us off? Does anybody have a rant or a rave on the top of their head?
I can do a rave.
All right, let's hear it.
I'm going to rave about dry suits because I'm going to be honest. Never. I mean, listen.
You swore me to secrecy on this, Weld.
Let's be fair here. I'm gonna put this as gingerly as I can put it. We don't. A dry suit where we are isn't a necessity. You know what I mean? You can paddle without it. I mean, unless you're a complete pussy, you can paddle 10 months a year around here without a dry suit, and I have for many years. Right. The other day, I pulled a dry suit. I was going to meet someone to paddle a Big Sandy, and I was like walking through the shelves, and because I'm co-owner of Immersion Research, as Grace likes to point out at the beginning of every show, I have the luxury of just picking out a dry suit at will. And took it to the river, and it was pretty darn good. I have to say, not too shabby. Although I saw a dude in a pair of neoprene pants and a dry top putting on also. I was like, yeah, brother, stay true.
Wait a second.
Give in.
Wait a second.
Yeah.
Is this like a new thing for you to wear a dry suit?
It's something that I have not really done a lot of, to be sure.
Oh my God, dude.
I know a lot about dry suits for sure, but I was always like, I'm going paddling. I don't have time to deal with that right now, you know? And then I feel guilty for taking one, and I don't, you know, I mean, I don't know. I'm a mess.
Well,
I have to say that after our conversation about this last week, well, you know, I had to say, I think of a dry suit, at least in the Northwest, as being like an essential piece of safety equipment.
Sure.
I agree.
I wouldn't doubt that where you are. There's no question about it. You know?
Anywhere when there's cold water.
You're from out this way, Gelman. You know the story. I mean, you paddle here in November. You know, it
was miserable, man. I was so cold. I got my first dry suit when I moved to the Northwest. And I remember when I moved out here and everybody was like, oh, you guys paddle in the winter out there? It's got to be so cold. And I was like, this is child's play compared to West Virginia in the winter. And I have a dry suit now. Yeah. Like, I don't, in the words of Andrew McEwen, the dry suit makes hardcore attitude obsolete.
I know. Isn't that heartbreaking in some ways, though? Come on.
No, it's not. I mean, how are you going to go to the river in your pajamas if you don't have a dry suit?
I know. It's a rave. I'm not ranting. Okay. I'm raving, right?
All right. I'm going to rant about.
But it was very weird standing around the takeout, not doing anything, not changing, not hopping around freezing cold, not desperate to get whatever dry clothes I have on as fast as humanly possible. I could feel my toes. There was a lot of things I'm not really that used to. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Grace.
I'm going to rant about environmentalist.
Oh, boy.
You ready for this? So, okay.
Oh, yes, we are. This is going to be good.
Ryan Zinke over here.
So there's this, I've been working my tail off for a long period of time to bring awareness to this wild and scenic on the Nolichucky. 50 years since this act it became law, big time, huge amount of momentum, hundreds of thousands of views on the video that I put together. Governors are talking. Lewis is beating, behind the scenes, getting everything done. Well, my contact was forwarded to me from someone. I don't listen to this show, I'm sure. But anyway, someone in Johnson City. And anyway, this person says to me, hey, there's a lot of momentum and a lot of talk around wild and scenic here on the Nolichucky. I really have an outlet and, I don't know, 18,000 email addresses I would send your video out to and this and that and the other. But I'm afraid I can't do that because in the video, you have a girl pulling up rocks off of the bottom of the river, and that's really going to mess up the environment for the hellbenders. I mean, you can't see the freaking forest for the trees. If that's all you're doing and looking at that and you're going to derail this initiative to get wild and scenic because someone's moving rocks in the bottom of the river, you've lost the plot. I can't help you.
I'm wondering who I should be boycotting. Is it you? Who,
Exactly. Somebody needs to
did
play.
you, I just can we just boil this down to who I'm boycotting and just move on?
Exactly. I'm just gonna rant about environmentalists who, yes, we all want everything to be perfect, but no, it's not. Pick your battles, get something done. It's going to be better for everybody.
Man, I mean, like we work really closely with the traditional conservation groups at Outdoor Alliance, but I just like on this theme, I feel like a big reason for the existence of our organization, what we're trying to do is this idea that nobody's going to protect these places because they saw a picture of them in National Geographic. It's like what inspires people to become conservationists, to make a difference in the world, is like going out and experiencing these places, like having, little girls able to go play in the river and throw rocks, and having us able to go out and go see these amazing places and go kayaking and experience these places and get stoked and bring that inspiration back to like doing good work and to protect these places in a way that is respectful of those experiences that are really the actual genesis of a conservation ethic. I think that's a little bit of a different perspective that I hope that we're bringing to this work than some of the traditional conservation groups. Right. I feel you, man.
You guys do for sure. I'm sure you battle that time and time again. And I want to, I'm a huge proponent of a healthy environment as much as the next guy, but it's not going to stick around, like you say, if people don't touch it, smell it, feel it, experience it. So that's my rant.
Sweet.
You got something, Lewis?
I do. I'm going to rave about my Theracane. Are you guys familiar with the Theracane?
Oh, I love a Theracane.
I don't like to be touched, and I don't like to be touched by anything.
Well, let me describe the Theracane.
A device or
like
person.
This is doing a service for all the kayakers out here who are potentially not familiar with the Theracane, which is a giant plastic candy cane looking thing that you use to get knots out of your back. And if you've not experienced the Theracane, like I travel with it, I put it in my bag when I went down to Chile last winter. It is essential. Yeah. Get a Theracane.
That looks awful.
Oh,
Do you guys like massages?
Oh, dude, I know what I'm getting you for Christmas.
I hate massages.
All right. Do we have anything else to add to Hammer Factor 44? I feel like we did a pretty good talking about, some of the gravity of our sport, but I'd love to hear our listeners' opinions on that one.
And we're going to get it.
All right. Until next episode, thank you for listening.